like, subscribe, and comment. That'd be great.
Werewolf the Podcast can be found now at all good podcasting sites. This video is sponsored by Plop to Drop, the new app from App Store or Google Play that times the release from your ass to the water of your poop, and from that can work out your digestive health. Go find it. Plop to Drop.
So let us continue with Fenn's Viking adventures, Loki's son. You hopefully have listened to the last episode with him meeting his Viking soul bearer Thorstein and becoming combined with him. We also learnt why he's now called Fenrir, as in Fenrir of Norse mythology, you know, the big fuck off giant wolf. So go listen to the last episode. We will go into how Thorstein became one of the most famous Vikings we've never heard of, and how he gained his power. From this start, he became king in the Norse realm for more than a century. He took on a godlike status, and how his people loved him for what he brought to them, success and riches beyond any tribe's dreams. Unlike in our times, the Norse could happily accept that someone could share a creature's soul. Some of the great sagas told of gods and men that could choose to change themselves into animals at will. Look at Loki and Odin. They did a lot of lying, cheating, and seducing as other creatures. Seducing as an animal is a bit weird though, eh? The young maid that would not be attracted to a giant bull, eh? Let's not go any further, because we don't look fondly on bestiality these days. However, the Vikings seem to think it was okay. Thorstein met Fenn one afternoon while fishing, and they got on like a house on fire. Houses on fire would be a big part of their future, to be honest. Well, countries on fire, let's say that instead of houses. Houses are just a tiny part of what Thorstein helped put to the torch. Thorstein had already been recognised as a great warrior by the time he was aged 14, which is surprising. His farmstead had been attacked by bandits while his father was away at the market. This shit would happen a lot in the bad old days of the Norse world. The thieves would see that the man had left his home and then think they would have easy pickings, even though Norse women could fight like fuck. They had wandered into the homestead that afternoon and demanded the goats and anything of value should be theirs. Interestingly, when dealing with Vikings raiding Vikings, they hardly ever did that raping and pillaging thing that you would assume would come with the territory. It was seen as unhonourable to do that kind of thing to your own people, but stealing all their shit, that was okay. The two brothers of the farm's family had been in the fields but came running back to see the man threatening their mother. She was a proud Viking woman looking them over with their baby sister in her arms. Thorstein had wandered up to the men pretty cocksure of himself. Fenn, his now named Wolfsoul, was in tow, and he knew this would be a crucial moment where Thorstein would gain some notoriety. He was 12 at this time, although he looked older and had no weapons. There was no reason to be so confident. He should have been pooing his pants, a crying ball of scared kid, but not our little Thorstein. He shouted at the men whilst walking up behind them, telling them to let his mother go. The men had turned to look at the threat given, and they smiled at the unarmed youngster, ignoring him to continue their conversation with the mother. She shushed her baby, giving it a rhythmic rock to settle it. When the baby was quiet, she smiled at the men and said confidently, "I would listen to my son if I were you, otherwise he will kill you for your lack of manners." The men laughed in her face and turned to the boy. "Come then, boy, kill us. We are afeard that you are here. We are armed and 6, so we will struggle to overcome such a whelp as you. What will you use for your fight, your hands and teeth?" The man was a bit wobbly on his feet and drawled he was drunk and ready to show off to the others, even if that involved abusing a child. Thorstein smiled and looked the man dead in the eye. It was at this time the man realised he had fucked up. Something about the boy's demeanour frightened him. Something in the back of his brain pinged into life. It recognised that there was something to fear in this small kid. Unfortunately for the man, the alcohol bubbling through his blood turned that section of his brain off. "I will give you an opportunity to walk away from this," the boy said. "You can walk away and no more will be said. I will not even mention this moment to my father. If you stay, Indeed, I will use my teeth and claws to tear you to strips. I will then take those scraps to feed to the crows. The man focused on the key words in this monologue and carefully deconstructed the sentence in his drunken haze. Claws, he said, removing his headgear and scratching his balding pate. Looking at the other men, he expected them to laugh, but they stared at where the boy stood. So he turned back to the boy. Before him now was a massive wolf-like man. Its pelt was blacker than any night, and it stared at him in silence. Its eyes were pits of fire, and it smiled. It fucking smiled. If a wolf's head could smile, it smiled. The woman began to talk, and the men turned to her, unwilling to believe what they saw. I did tell you that he would kill you. He is often not nice enough to give you chances, but he does not like to kill in front of his family. He thinks it's distasteful. Huh? Said the man, jaw-dropping as he turned back to the now charging wolfman. Screams were cut short as the beast did his worst. Stories like the above meant that he, Thorstein, was a feared member of the tribe and was slowly and carefully working his way up the ranks to a point where he would have a centre seat in the village lodge. He was going to be a jarl, but even though he knew that he could take it just with his martial prowess, he also knew that he would need followers and support to become a great king. For a king to be in power over many, he needed to make sure he had helpful supporters that would be loyal to him. This is where he and he and Will, differ. I know loyalty is pish. It's not real. It's all about those people supporting you while they feed off you. They take what you offer and plot behind your back. Though, to be in charge of many, you do need supporters, and those you can use to control all. He started at 14, when he put together the first 12 berserkers in the history of the Ostmen. The berserkers have a kind of mystical history that has been built around them. They are the madmen of battle. They would run into battle in some trance, allowing them to take incredible damage and fight on. They were supposed to fight naked and without fear. They were first into battle and last to leave, and they would bite their shields and often have to stop mid-battle to straighten their swords because they'd have bent them with their powerful strikes. There have been a lot of historians who have looked at the evidence to try and find the truth about these warriors. They look at the sagas to try and work out if they were a real thing or not. It turns out they were real things. The berserkers, that is. Historians have promulgated many theories on who they were and how they became who they were. It is mostly about alcohol and hallucinogenic drugs to the historians. It was thought that these would make people turn into beasts that they imagined in their mind, not that maybe some of them could actually turn into beasts. When we look at the root word berserker, it can be translated to bear men or bear men, as in, naked men, or the animal bear men. So you see that berserker was real and that Thorstein was the first, and alright, Thorstein wasn't a bear, but he was a fucking animal. Thorstein was a werewolf. So he was no bear, but he had the soul of a wolf, which he could imbibe and then be a wolf or werewolf. He had all the powers of the werewolf too. Strong, almost impossible to kill, and just fucking awesome. He got together with 11 others in his tribe to form the first unit of berserkers. Although before this, the first thing he did was attack another tribe by himself. Thorstein knew that to cause fear in the enemy was what he wanted more than anything else. The tribe in the next fjord had been building a small army of warriors that they were planning to sail around into the village, take over the port, and raid. When the Jarl heard this, he sat wondering how on earth he would stop it. His men were mainly away in Rust doing their Viking thing, and he only had a few warriors and women to defend the village. It was looking bad. Thorstein then offered that he would take his little band of psychos into the next village and cause a little bit of psychotic mayhem. There were only 12 of them, and the oldest was 16, so the Jarl said no, but Thorstein, being Thorstein, decided he would go and do it anyway. He went by himself. Now, He'd only come out as a changeling to his family and some of his friends at this point. He had listened to his wolf soul and kept it secret, as he would not be feared or listened to straight away he would be feared or not listened to straight away if everyone saw him as a big fuck off werewolf. Keeping that in the closet must have been a challenge. He needed to create a reason why it was helpful for those people around him to have a werewolf that worked with them. He could not be feared figure, and he may be sent from the village or even killed in his sleep if they, didn't want him around. So this little adventure would give him the perfect way of showing how useful it was to have a werewolf on your team. He went by himself over the hills and through the country quickly in his wolf form to the enemy village, where he saw the 25 new warriors as they drank and celebrated the night. They were soon drunk, and after eating, drinking, and fucking the local women, they fell dead to sleep in a bunkhouse a little out of the village. They had no sentries on watch, as they thought they had nothing to fear from any of the other local villages in the area. Little did they know, there was a hungry werewolf on the search for fear. Thorstein was patient, and as his wolf he sat and waited until nothing but snores permeated the air. He then made his way to the bunk, where he decided to do his thing. The door was only lightly latched, and he made his way into the darkened hall. The only light was from the near-dead embers of the fire, no one tended. They were foolish men. He silently walked through the building as a werewolf, knowing that if anyone awoke, he would have killed them quickly and without challenge. When no one raised their heads and met his gaze, he wondered what to do. Should he make his presence felt? Should he roar and destroy all his men as they rushed from their cots? No, he had a much better plan, a fun idea. He moved to the first snoring man, reaching for the man's skull. It was morning. At least it seemed so. The infernal birds twittered and tweeted, and it hurt his tortured head. The dwarves must have crawled into his brain in the night and were busy working with their hammers. Knud woke. The inside of his mouth tasted like ashes and was dry as a witch's tit. He slowly raised his head from the floor, where he'd spent the night lying in a puddle of his own piss. That happens when you drink too much of the good stuff, he found. He cracked open his eyes that felt the brightness of the day as a baby's first view. He was discombobulated, confused, and did not remember where he was for the first few moments. Quickly he remembered, and gently feeling the seat of his pants, wished that he did not. He hoped none would remember this moment. He needed to clean himself before the others noticed the accident. He looked around the room. There was no movement from the other men. He was the first to awake, and would be the first to laugh at the others as they raised themselves from their sleep. What a night! The food, the drink, the women were a wonder. Today they were to go and fight. It was really worth it for the pay and the pleasure of the evening. He wandered outside in order to slake his thirst in the trough. He slammed open the doors and let the fresh air and light into the lodge. The cool air felt great, and the wind moving against his skin was delicious. This was undoubtedly a hangover well earned. He found the trough and dunked his head deep into the cool waters, rinsing the night from his eyes and filling his mouth with the ice-cold liquid. The feeling was shocking, reviving, and refreshing. It cleared some of the dullness from his head as he held it deep in the cooling fluid. He stroked his hands through his hair and removed his head from the water, shaking the excess off like a large dog. He stood and looked upon the village. Life had started somewhat earlier in the village than in the warrior lodge, and he enjoyed those that looked upon him. After some time, to allow his mind to swim back into focus, he gave the gods gratitude for the day. He turned back to the lodge to bring his brothers back into the land of the living, to remind Leif of his limpness last night with the lass, and to take the piss out of him for the rest of his life. He walked back to the lodge, laughing and still shaking the water from his hair. There seemed to be something strange and wrong. Something was missing from the scene. What was it? There was a lack of sound. No men were awake. No man moved or stirred. There was no snores. He laughed a little less certain and went to his brother's. His brother had made it to his bunk and could only be identified under the sheet by his red hair. He sneaked over in order to frighten him and grabbed his chest. "Awake, you limp-dicked disaster! You had the match of Freya in your arms last night and you were too drunk to get a rod, he laughingly mocked. The body moved, but no response came. He pulled back the sheet and realised that the sticky fluid his boots had been in was not spilt beer. It was blood. Blood was now everywhere. The head of his brother fell from the bed to the floor, where it lay pale and bloodless. His neck hadn't been cut, but torn from the body. He shook the body again, thinking this might affect the brother lying there. It was difficult for him to accept that he was dead. It didn't make any sense. What had happened? He was still dreaming and having some drink-fueled nightmare or something. Eventually he screamed and bellowed his rage in anger. He could find out. He would find out who did this and they would die. He yelled to raise all in the room to this. But no one man lifted his head. He jumped to his feet and shouted, slipping in the fluid on the floor. No one reacted. He was confused. He moved to his other brother lying in the dimness. Sten! Sten! He ran to him and grabbed him by the cloak collar to shake him awake. The head fell from the body and rolled to his feet. Dead eyes stared up at him. He now was not angry or confused. He was terrified. As others entered the lodge, they found that they were all dead. Every man that had entered the bunkhouse that night was gone. Someone had somehow entered the room and killed each man in the most brutal of ways. Their heads had been twisted off their bodies and replaced on their torsos. He couldn't understand why all were dead except him. Why him? Why had he been chosen to survive? Whoever did this killed over 20 men without anyone seeing them or noticing them. This could not be a man who did this, could it? Why had he been the one chosen to live? Was it a reward or a warning? Had his brothers died for some reason related to him? His mind was filled with abject horror. Thorstein was asked for by his Jarl the evening after what had happened in the next village. I know it was you, and you did it against my will, but I thank you for what you did. I know it was you. Please do not say not. I recognize evil when I hear it, although this was our evil. I thank you for it, spoke the Jarl. As in all things, secrets do not stay secret for long, and the news about the killings got out into the world. Of course, the number of the dead doubled and then doubled again, as in the telling of all stories. Having said that, though, the number of attackers stayed at 1. A 14-year-old boy had sneaked into a village and killed over 100 men as they slept and walked away, leaving no one wiser until the morning when they found 99 bodies with 98 heads. That was the story. He was supposed to have kept a head for himself. He did. Thanks for listening to the second Viking story. Please go back and listen to the first one, or listen to it before this, or do something. Thanks to Plop to Drop for sponsoring the video, and speak to you soon. Love you, bye. Plop to Drop isn't a real thing. Like and subscribe.